Hello everyone, a new game in Zen mode, which means that for now I can't see my opponent's rating. It will be revealed to me at the end of the game. My opponent starts with the pawn to e4 and I'm going to play knight to f6. I'll play the Alekhine Defense, which is a rather rare defense that immediately attacks the pawn on e4. So of course the pawn on e4 can move to a5 to push back the knight. That's the usual response, and my opponent plays it. And here the usual move is to go to d5, so I'll go to d5. He can still chase me away with c4, in which case I would go to b6, but white plays d4. They keep the option of playing c4 a bit later, by the way. For now I'll play d6, and that's the idea behind the Alekhine Defense, to encourage white's e-pawn to advance to e4 and then e5, so it can be attacked with the d6 pawn, maybe the knight on c6, if knight f3 is played to defend it, and bishop g4 to pin the knight. And so we put a lot of pressure on the e5 pawn. But c4 is played. So the knight comes to b6 here. And I have this threat of capturing on e5. If white recaptures, it would allow me to exchange the queens. That's why white plays f4. But I can take. White won't recapture with the d pawn to avoid the exchange of queens. So they'll recapture with the f pawn. And now knight c6. If white pushes, I win the e5 pawn. And after knight f3, there will be bishop g4. My opponent plays knight f3. I think the most popular move is bishop e3. Precisely to prevent the bishop from coming to g4. So I play bishop g4, and I threaten to take the knight, sooner or later, with pressure on d4. Bishop e3 is now played. So I can take with the bishop, and if the queen recaptures, can I go and take on d4? Because after that, I leave him the open line to come to b7 anyway. But there will be that fork on c2, I think I can do it. Bishop takes, queen takes, knight takes. Even if he recaptures with the bishop, I take back. And if he takes back on b7, the advantage is that I have the knight p6 defending the rook on a8. So I take. He'll probably recapture with the g2 pawn on f3 to keep the protection of the d4 pawn. After that, I'll play e6 and maybe give checks on h4 at some point along the diagonal, since the g-pawn will no longer be there to block. On the other hand, the bishop could come back. There he takes back. I push the pawn to a6. And in this position, he still has a pawn center. Granted, his king's shelter is damaged on the king's side, but he can still try to do queenside castling, by the way. Cavalli c3 was played, and he's looking to do queenside castling. So if I play queen h4 check, bishop f2, I don't see what comes next. Am I afraid of something? If he pushes d5, I could take the pawn on e5. If he pushes c5, I could settle back on d5 under the protection of the queen. I could go play bishop to b4 to pin his knight, but what does that get me? What am I threatening with that? Maybe just play bishop to e7 with the idea of pushing f6 afterwards. If he takes, I'll recapture with the bishop to attack. And with bishop to e7, I threaten bishop to h4 check. If the bishop returns to f2, I could take. So I'll play bishop to e7 to have this threat of bishop to h4, and maybe this f6 push afterwards. So I'm playing the equine defense. I know some basics, but it's not my favorite defense. My favorite defense, as you know, is actually the Caro-Kann defense. And in my youth, I was a French defense player. I've also played some Sicilian defenses. Queen to e2 is played. And so here he lets me take the pawn on d4. Why? I'm not afraid of the pin because I could take his queen. Even if he takes mine, I could recapture, and I would have won material anyway. A pawn is the quality. And on knight d4, what is he going to do? Bishop takes, queen takes, maybe rook d1 after. But I don't see the follow-up. No, knight d4, that seems very good to me. I don't see his trap. Why did he go to e2? He is looking to do a queenside castling, that's true. But why didn't he want to go to d2? Well, in any case, I would have played bishop h4. Here, I don't see his idea. It worries me. Because when your opponent gives you something, don't assume that he made a mistake. Assume instead that it's a trap. First, try to see where the trap could be. If you really don't see any trap, then yes, you can consider it a mistake and take the pawn. And here, I don't see any trap. So I'm going to take on d4, and it's an important pawn, because it's the pawn that was solidifying his whole center. So I take back on d4. Let's see what my opponent's rating and level are. But here he made a big mistake anyway with his move queen e2. He's attacking the queen, so that's what he wanted, certainly to open up the position to attack the queen. It's true that the queen is short on squares, but she does have this square on h4. And actually, I see bishop h4 check. That's going to lead to mate. Play on the dark squares. I just took his dark squared bishop and I'm going to win on the dark squares. He has no move here. Bishop h4, he's forced to put the queen there. And dame takes, and we end up with a kind of reversed scholar's mate. Now let's find out his rating. And you can see that in this time control, he's rated 1861. So he has a very high rating compared to the mistakes he made in this game. He's already played 1,164 games in just 1 year. So he's a player who plays a lot in all time controls, actually. You can also see that he plays in faster time controls with a rating of 1,747. And in very, very fast time controls, he has 1,432. But here he had time. And I'm going to show you how he could have played better against the equine defense. So let's look at this opening. He starts with e4 and plays the first moves of the equine defense very well. kf6 I attack, he counterattacks. I go to d5, he plays d4. That's the most popular line. I play d6, he pushes my knight, and I go to b6. And there is the variation with knight f3, and there is the move nf4. He has every right to play this move. It's a good variation. But I take on e5, he recaptures with the f-pawn, he avoids the queen's exchange, and he's right to do so. Knight c6, I come to attack d4, and if it advances, I capture the e5 pawn. And that's where he makes a mistake. He plays knight f3 intuitively. Actually, the right move here is bishop e3, to protect the pawn without letting me play bishop g4. And so generally, black plays bishop f5 before playing e6. But you see on knight f3, it changes everything. And by the way, look at the analysis bar. It brings me back to equality, whereas I had a slight disadvantage in the opening. It's normal, the Alekhine's defense is a bit complicated to play in the first moves. But when the opponent plays knight f3, it allows me to play bishop g4. And here it's very interesting, because the pin of the knight, even attacking the knight, makes d4 much weaker, even when he plays bishop e3. Whereas in the other position, my bishop should have been on f5. But here I have the possibility to take and then attack the d4 pawn. To avoid losing the d4 pawn, he has to recapture with the g2 pawn on f3. But he opens up this diagonal for me, and so I quickly play e6, knight c3, and bishop e7, with the intention of playing bishop h4. And here he's going to make a big blunder with queen e2. But actually it's not easy to know what he should have played instead, because even after queen d2, bishop h4 is still very strong. The computer recommends bishop e2. And on bishop h4 check, not bishop f2, but king f1. But we understand that in this position, black has largely equalized the position. They have no problem with the king's uncastling in a sector where it is not very well sheltered. And bishop f2 is terrible, because it allows me to exchange on check. I can win the d4 pawn, but even better is queen h4 check. And then, for example, queenside castling. And all the black pieces are in the fight. The d4 pawn is going to fall. The king is weak. It's a beautiful position for black, simply a winning position. Even knight takes e5 could happen, since there's a vis-a-vis rook queen in the position. So as you can see, after this move, knight c6, what he was missing was the understanding of the defense of the d4 pawn by bishop e3 and not knight f3 immediately. I hope this short video has helped you to better understand the equine defense, to perhaps be able to trap your opponent if you play the equine defense, but especially if you have white not to fall into these mistakes, and to remember here to defend the pawn d4 with bishop e3 and only bring out the knight to f3 once the bishop has come to f5. You can leave me likes, comments, share the video, and we'll meet again soon for new adventures. Goodbye everyone.